400-meter competency might be more valuable and more illustrative of your fitness and your longevity potential than today. We're going to talk about the quarter, the 400-meter run, as the ultimate test of full body functional fitness and longevity potential. The 400 meters is called the race of truth because it exposes everything about your fitness, your strength, your power, your speed, your metabolic fitness, and your ability to hold it together when all the systems are placed under extreme stress as you race that lap around the track. The 400 meters might be the single most revealing fitness marker for aging gracefully. In contrast, mainstream fitness culture, what do we see? We have an extreme bias toward programming that is heavily emphasizing aerobic endurance. Things like jogging, steady state cardio machines, and group classes that put your heart rate up in that training zone and last for a prolonged period of time. The vast majority of fitness programming, even stuff like CrossFit and High Rocks, which are supposed to be developing broad-based functional fitness, various types of attributes, but in the big picture, they are still extreme endurance challenges because of the duration of how long a class or a competition is. When we overemphasize endurance with our fitness pursuits, it comes at the expense of the qualities that are probably the most critical for aging gracefully. Those are strength, power, explosiveness, and the ability to produce force quickly. Those are the attributes that protect you from the number one cause of injury and death in Americans over age 65, which is falling and adverse related health consequences. So, in this episode, we're going to break down the fascinating physiology of the 400 meters, explain aerobic versus anaerobic metabolism and the fitness modalities that correlate, and show you why this brutally honest race reveals more about real fitness than almost anything else you can do. By the time we're done, you'll understand why the 400 meters might be the ultimate longevity event and why mainstream fitness has largely gotten it backwards by overemphasizing endurance at the expense of speed, power, and explosiveness. You're going to want to get out to your local track, get that stopwatch, and start tracking the best longevity marker ever. Let's do the show. Speaking of what are the best longevity markers in the fitness world, I've seen so much clickbait style content coming up on Instagram or on YouTube along the lines of, you should be able to do this, this, and this to call yourself super fit, to rank in the top 10%, all these different blather spitting out without the scientific validation. I mean, it's fun. It's kind of cute to look at something, maybe get some people inspired or thinking about fitness in a broader perspective. But the stuff is also kind of lame because there's usually no reference to longevity science or even exercise physiology. And there's no practical analysis of peak performers to show that this stuff really works that they're listing on their top 10 list. I mean, you could call this stuff the internet at its worst because it's just spewing content in an attempt to convince you of something and elicit emotions like FOMO, or even to spark controversy from people like me going, this sounds like bullshit. So I guess it's working in that sense, right? My biggest objection, perhaps, to these fitness benchmark type of content that you see is that nothing is ever age graded. Come on, man. Give me a break here. Fitness benchmarks for athletic college-age males or females, which is what a lot of the scientific research is conducted on, because that's the talent pool that they can pull that want to kill themselves on a stationary bike for $60 a week for an 8-week study, right? The fitness benchmarks for young people have minimal relevance to someone who's fighting the battle at age 50, 60, or 80 trying to stay fit. A lot of the stuff's not even sex graded. So we have tremendous disparity between male and female peak performance, as seen by the standards set by the elite athletes in the Olympics and world class. So we need to kind of get this focus if we're going to put out something relevant rather than read, you should be able to deadlift 1.5 to 2 times your body weight, or you should be able to run a 7-minute mile. Okay. That would be a nice if it were achieved, but you know what I'm saying. We need more context, more scientific support for this stuff, and a carefully curated aging scale. And guess where I found one? The wonderful world of Masters Track and Field, where I participate in, you guessed it, the 400 meters, as well as the high jump and other events. But those are my two favorite events, and they're so strongly correlated with longevity. That's why I love this recent challenge. I've been going at this now for around 6 years, total dedication to Masters Track and Field with speed golf on the back burner and all the endurance stuff of my past completely out of my life now. I have no relevance or no practicality to endurance training anymore. It's all focused on sprinting, jumping, and being forceful and explosive and powerful. Oh, what about your aerobic competency, Brad, which is important for longevity, I'll argue, and I've seen on many other podcasts. Guess what? People who are fast, explosive, and powerful and have good competency in the 400 meters have, by necessity, tremendous aerobic endurance. So when you sprint, when you lift heavy weights, when you do things that are high intensity and brief in duration, you are still building the aerobic system that underpins all that. And of course, complementing that is an active, energetic lifestyle, the foundation of which is walking. That's what our book, Born to Walk, is all about, and detailing how walking forms the foundation of tremendous aerobic endurance for all other fitness attributes that you pursue. And the best ones to pursue are the ones that preserve and stimulate power, explosiveness, fast force production, the things I talked about at the outset. So, an age-graded standard exists from the great research of the Masters Track and Field historians who compare the top times in the world records, at the various 5-year age divisions, which is how Masters Track and Field competitions are organized. I think they start at like age 35 is the lowest division of Masters Track and Field, and it goes all the way up in 5-year categories to the 100-plus division. And yes, there are some participants in the 100-plus division. You can see the great clip on YouTube from Lester Wright, 101 years old, and he ran the 100 meters at the Penn Relays recently, 2024, 2025, coming through in about 28 seconds and setting world record for 100 plus. There's 100 plus pole vaulters, high jumpers. It's really amazing to see the outliers that are excelling at Masters Track and Field. But if you look at all the data and the stats and the rankings and the best times in history for athletes age 40 to 45, or age 6, it goes 40 to 44, 45 to 49, 50 to 54, 55 to 59. I'm in the 60 to 64 now, and on my 65th birthday, which is a long way away, but it'll be a great celebration for many reasons, including that I go up into a higher age category. So when I turned 60 last year, a few days later, I entered my first Masters Track and Field competition of the year, and the first one ever in the 60-plus division, and snuck in there to get the briefly world #1 ranking in the high jump for males 60-plus and #2 ranking in the 400 meters. So all the Masters Track and Field athletes, instead of whining or feeling depressed on their birthday, they're happy to jump into a new category and have slower time standards, right, to pursue to win a gold medal or to get on the rankings or the all-time list. So what Masters Track and Field has observed across many events is around a 6% decline per decade in the peak performance standard. For example, running 400 meters in 60 seconds at age 50 compares to a 63.6 seconds at age 60, and so forth. And you can calculate this across every event. And what's also cool is they give an age-graded performance standard for all the top-ranked athletes. So Sue McDonald, my former podcast guest, who has set 16 Masters world records in the 55 to 59 division, 60 to 64 division, which she now competes in. And she will actually have a percentile ranking for her 400-meter record in the women's 60 to 64. It'll be 100% or maybe even 101%, and they calculate that off the world record. So even amongst those age rankings, let's say there's not a great record put up in the female 95 to 99 division at 800 meters because no one participated in it. And so the best person might only have an 83% age-graded ranking standard against the world record. So you can see, even amongst the best athletes in the various age divisions, the true outliers who are performing at the highest level. Like Sue McDonald, Liane Martinez, another former podcast guest, running a 10.79 100-meter time at the age of 45 in the 45 to 49 division, competing against the best athletes in the nation of his home in Sweden. Absolutely amazing standard. Now, he's not going to make the Olympic final with a 10.79, but when you factor in that 6% decline per decade, and he's 45 years old, a good 20 years older than most of the athletes in the Olympics, that is a pretty impressive standard. And that's something that we might want to throw into anything that you see that is calibrated toward young people. We're going to talk about the Cooper Institute, Texas A&M research about competency in the mile run at age 50 shortly. And you can use that 6% adjustment if you happen to be older than that or perhaps even younger than that. Okay, so these age-appropriate challenges are very important to keep us motivated and not discouraged when we're looking at arbitrary standards for college age subjects in exercise physiology. I can think of a great example of my dad, Walter Kearns, gracefully sailing through his older years. And in his 80s, he could easily walk 18 holes, even on a hilly course, which is around 5 to 6 miles of walking, carrying a heavy bag and shooting near par routinely. Into his 90s, he was still playing championship level golf, shooting well under his age at almost every round, which is a huge milestone for golfers. As you can imagine, it's pretty tough when par is 72. A 72-year-old shooting par is shooting his age. And my dad, as he got into his 80s and 90s, could easily shoot in the high 70s, low 80s. So he was racking up over 1,150 golf rounds under his age, which could be an all-time world record if they kept track of that stuff. But anyway, into his 90s, things would change a little bit where he would most often take a cart, or if we were going to walk, he would walk 9 holes and feel great about that. The age-graded standard still performing fantastically. And then in his last couple of years, he passed at age 97 in 2019. What he would mainly be doing for his walking was the half-mile loop at the park with his dog every single morning. And that was a great way to keep fit, keep active, even though he was getting up in years. And that half-mile walk in the park, as time started to count down, it turned into half of the half-mile loop. So it would be a quarter-mile walk for him, and then we'd turn around and go to the car, and that was fine. And as the clock kept coming, eventually those walks were just around the backyard. And eventually, in his final months, the walk of the day was from the bedroom to the kitchen for a meal and back to the bedroom. So it was a nice, graceful representation of how, it would be nice to aspire to walk the golf course at 80 or walk half the golf course at 90 and to hang in there and live to your full potential, 97 being quite a good longevity standard, and be able to reach these graceful milestones that are adjusted for age. So we have that 6% decline per decade in track and field. We can plug that into various other things. Same with my dad's example, right? We're all guaranteed to slow down over time, so we might as well set some standards and try to repeat the challenges and adjust them as we go along. So now it's time to think about some challenges that you might want to establish of things that you love to do. I've written a blog article about this, conveying, asserting that I know the single best exercise to promote longevity. And the answer is the thing that you enjoy doing the most. So, whatever it is, that is going to be the highest ranked. And then today, as we talk about the quarter and some other attributes that are proven by exercise physiology to have great longevity potential, of course, we want to throw some science in. But none of it matters if you don't enjoy what you're doing and you're not motivated and turning things into a habit, like walking the golf course or walking around the park. And speaking of my dad, Walter Kearns, and his long passion and fascination with golf, he passed that on to many of his sons, including Wally, my brother, who at age 73 plays 3 rounds of golf on foot every week, oftentimes in hot weather in Southern California. No matter, no problem if it's going to be 100 degrees. A lot of golfers are passing, but Wally's out there playing regularly for many years, many decades. He's shot his age twice in recent years, starting in his high 60s, low 70s. Now, can he back squat 1.5 times his body weight or deadlift twice his body weight? Don't think so, but he can beat all those bros in golf pretty easily. And he enjoys doing that. And that's what his training and his focus and his interest is, in preserving his dedication to golf and his ability to walk the golf course. Okay, so that's his best longevity marker, is walking around the course, feeling great, and shooting a low score. I've done some posting on the internet and talked about my wonderful experience of completing the Cactus to Clouds hiking trail in Palm Springs, California. That's 4 times in the last 4 years, so you've got to hear about it a lot if you're a regular listener. It's rated as the #1 most difficult hiking trail in the United States, maybe the world, by the definition of sustained vertical gain for a long period of time. The trail starts at the desert floor in downtown Palm Springs. You can look it up. You can preview the route on All Trails. It's super cool, but it climbs 8,400 vertical feet in the first 9.3 miles. That is like climbing a staircase. That's about 1,000 foot per mile, a little under 1,000 foot per mile elevation gain. So it's like climbing a staircase like an office building for 9 miles without a break. The entire hike, the total route up to the top of Southern California, Mount San Jacinto, is 22 miles. And it's quite a challenge for me because I'm not an extreme endurance athlete anymore. As I said, I'm a sprinter and a high jumper. So dusting off the hiking gear and trying for this incredible all-day hike is definitely something that is going to keep me focused, motivated, and trying to prepare adequately so that I can repeat the hike every year as my bucket list item indefinitely. So that's an endurance challenge. Great to mix it in with the power, strength, explosiveness that frames my day-to-day training patterns and that I'm totally dedicated to. And by the way, without any real endurance training, I've been able to succeed on that hike from a baseline of sprint training and strength training in the gym. Okay, so doing what you love is the #1 best longevity exercise. And now let's go for some scientifically validated longevity benchmarks, so we can't just make the excuse that playing video games and working my thumbs is my favorite thing to do. So that's going to be my longevity exercise. Sorry, that's not going to work for the exercise physiologist. We need to integrate challenges that include functional muscle strength, cardiovascular endurance, and mobility flexibility. One thing to realize as I promote the importance of power, explosiveness, rapid force production is that the anaerobic muscle fibers decline much more rapidly and severely with age than aerobic endurance. We preserve our endurance, we preserve our cardio much, much better than we do preserving our power, explosiveness. And it's not just from not doing it anymore since high school, but that is the driving factor. Okay, so when we can continue to put our muscles under load, when we continue to generate force quickly, such as with sprinting or jumping, we can preserve these attributes that are so important for longevity. Unfortunately, what we see out there are the fitness enthusiasts of the world, whatever percentage that is, smaller and smaller these days, but those who are dedicated to living that healthy, active, energetic lifestyle are generally doing a fantastic daily job preserving their aerobic endurance, getting their daily steps. Many seniors, especially, are doing a great job knowing how important step count is. They get out the door. They honor the widely cited UCLA study that revealed a stunning difference between seniors who had insufficient daily step count, which was defined as under 4,000 steps a day, versus an active population of seniors who were getting well over 4,000 steps a day. The active folks were shown to have larger hippocampi, better short-term processing, better long-term recall, and better health outcomes across the board. So they had better brains from their daily commitment to step count, not to mention all other forms of physical fitness that were improved in comparison to the sedentary folks. So walking every day and moving a lot throughout your daily life is huge, but it's simply not enough these days to achieve your longevity potential and age gracefully. The two biggest driving factors of accelerated aging, it's without dispute these days, are sarcopenia and dynapenia. That's the age-related loss of muscle mass, sarcopenia, and the age-related loss of muscle power, dynapenia. These are the fundamental drivers of accelerated aging, and looking at that gives a more profound result than all the blood tests you can do and all the laboratory studies you can do on someone to see how well they're aging. It's all about preserving functional muscle strength and power throughout life. That is number one. And if you want to argue and say, but what about cardio? Well, seniors who have muscle power and muscle strength, by definition, have excellent cardio. You can't just paint muscles onto your body and have them there existing when you are not fit and active and using your cardiovascular system to build those muscles. So there are many ways to achieve good aerobic endurance and good cardiovascular function, including if you never walk or jog or do steady state cardio, but you're in the gym working on those machines and sitting on the bench and sending text messages in between your sets, you're still getting an excellent cardiovascular workout, even when it's a strength-oriented workout. So you're kind of killing two birds with one stone when you put your muscles under resistance load or perform brief explosive bouts of sprinting, jumping, things like that. You're still building cardio. There is no justification to put steady state cardio into a box and make it an important mandatory checklist in order to be fit. But we seem to have done that with mainstream fitness programming, and people even segment, well, today's a cardio day and tomorrow's strength training, and then Saturday is my basketball game. Like they're three separate independent activities. They're all blending together with cardio underpinning everything, especially walking, which a lot of fitness enthusiasts, especially the hardcore ones, seem to discount and don't count it as a workout because it's not up in the higher training zones. But indeed, zone 1 cardio is a fantastic foundation for all the fitness endeavors that you aspire to do. Okay, so sarcopenia and dynapenia. Guess what? Walking and gentle steady state cardio, especially no impact, like sitting on a bike or climbing the stairs, it does very little to ward off sarcopenia and dynapenia. That's why you can see really enthusiastic cardiovascular exercise people who are hunched over, shriveled up, and shuffling along slower and slower with each passing year and decade, whether they're dedicated joggers, walkers, whatever, hikers. Things just start to slow down and the muscles and joints start to become less functional, even though they're out there hiking or walking every single day. So you have to load the skeleton with resistance exercise on a regular basis to prevent sarcopenia and dynapenia, and ideally you will conduct occasional brief, explosive, all-out sprints of some form. Of course, sprinting on flat ground is the best for bone density and for fat reduction, but a lot of people are not well adapted to just jump into a sprinting protocol, so there are many other ways to sprint. and I'm doing a whole show dedicated to the quarter. Maybe the quarter is not in the cards for you just yet, but you can model this by, let's say, performing an all-out 1-minute test on the assault bike where you try to generate as many watts or travel as far as the machine says you went in a short time. So we're talking about sprinting for power and explosiveness on an all-out exercise test that only lasts for 1 to 2 minutes. That's why the quarter is so highly regarded. It's all those energy systems that are recruited when you're doing something that doesn't last that long. I talked about CrossFit. I talked about High Rocks. These are competitions or classes that last at least 45 minutes, typical CrossFit class, maybe longer. High Rocks, even a great performer is going to go for well over an hour in the formal competition structure with the 1 kilometer runs in between the 8 big challenges that are in the venue. So because of the duration, that's why they're extreme endurance efforts. Even though you got to lift a lot of weight and do burpees and push a heavy sled and pull a heavy sled and things that are seen as power and building explosiveness, they are. But as the class goes on, or as the competition or the effort goes on longer and longer, it becomes more and more weighted to extreme endurance. What's happening now is I think we're seeing greater appreciation for the need for high intensity exercise and the research coming in. But it's been disrespected for decades, and I think still the casual fitness enthusiast kind of drifts away from doing things that are explosive and high intensity. Why is that? I think there's a lot of reasons. I think the intimidation factor is big, and the perceived degree of difficulty where you have to suffer in a different way than you might have ever experienced, even on a long, hot, sweaty hike. Yeah, you're getting tired. Yeah, you're ready to be done and be home. But it's a lot different than sprinting for maximum effort for 8 seconds. And to a lot of people who aren't accustomed to it, that might be distasteful to jump into something where you're revving it up all the way. Just that hesitancy factor that we need to overcome and sprinkle these things into our overall exercise regimen. So now let's go into more detail about why the quarter might be the ultimate fitness and longevity benchmark. As you may know, it's my athletic obsession, master's track and field. I'm drawn to it because it requires all those different attributes, especially because it's fun to do the shorter events, which are the 100 meters, that's one straightaway of a track, and the 200 meters, which is half a lap. But those are so weighted toward explosiveness that you can actually be deficient in broad-based functional fitness and aerobic competency and still go really fast for one straightaway on the track. You can have a spare tire and run a fast 100, but not so in the 400. So the other great thing about the 400 is it's relatable. It's a lap around a track. Everyone knows and has seen a track. There's a track in every community at virtually every school or park or other facility. So it's accessible. A lot of times the public is allowed to visit a track in your town. I'm sure you can find one nearby. It doesn't have to be on a track, of course. It could be on a pedestrian trail or anywhere where you have a sense for how long 400 meters is. But, you know, watching the Olympics, most people are familiar with the athletes sprinting around the track. It's such a beautiful event, widely regarded as the most torturous event in track and field, perhaps vying with the 800 meters for that title. That's 2 laps around the track where you have more aerobic contribution, but it is pure torture because it lasts for a short period of time. The athletes are running very, very fast. And I apologize to all the endurance freaks out there, and I used to be one of them, so I get to make a little fun, but your competency in the 400 meters says much more about your overall fitness for longevity than being able to shuffle through a long distance event like a marathon or a half marathon. That's still major props and thumbs up that you can go that long of a distance and cross the finish line and get a medal and however many hours it took you. But that performance is a very, very narrow sliver of fitness and has minimal relevancy to your longevity potential. Sorry to break it to you, but there are many other factors that are far more important than the shuffle ability. Next, my apologies to the gym bros as well, but 400-meter competency might be more valuable and more illustrative of your fitness and your longevity potential than simply your ability to throw around heavy weight and carry a lot of possibly extra non functional muscle mass. Again, a big, huge thumbs up for longevity that you don't have any sarcopenia to speak of. In fact, you have a bunch of extra that is going to serve you very, very well as the years go on. But if you can barely lumber around the track, that is going to be a huge deficiency. Also, apologies to the overcaffeinated, overly intense weekend warrior types who are hardcore into their adult basketball or soccer leagues, because you can kind of fake your way through this stuff a bit. You can shuffle up and down the court. You can still explode to the hoop with those great moves that you showed in high school back in the day. But you can also be on the court carrying around extra visceral fat and a high injury risk from poor mobility and poor functional fitness. So it might be, and it might is often seen that the player will score 14 points on Tuesday night's game, and then the next Tuesday they rupture their Achilles tendon and they're out of the league for years and years. Happens all the time. So what we're going for is something that shows a true athlete with all the competencies. 400 requires a tremendous level of anaerobic strength, power, and explosiveness, as well as a tremendous aerobic foundation. That's why it's called the race of truth. What's happening during the 400 meters is you are sequentially exhausting through the various high intensity energy production systems in the body. I've done a few shows detailing these, so we'll go through them quickly. But for exercise physiology lesson of the day, when you are performing a maximum all-out effort between 0 and 7 seconds, you are using what's called the ATP-creatine phosphate system. This is a system that fuels all-out efforts lasting 0 to 7 seconds. This is the ATP that is already stored inside the muscle cell. Boom, you use it up in 7 seconds. And then, if you want to continue going for an all-out effort longer than that brief maximum explosive effort, the body actually has to slow down. It is not capable of delivering pure maximum effort for longer than 7 seconds. You have maxed out the ATP. You have depleted the muscle cell from the stored ATP-creatine phosphate, and now you proceed into what's called, there's different terms, I'm going to make it simple here, the ATP lactate system, which fuels all-out efforts from 7 to 30 seconds. The new B-Rad Super Drink is a scientifically advanced electrolyte and hydration beverage that represents the very best in hydration, performance, and recovery. Our delicious strawberry lemon flavor hydrates 28% faster than water and contains potent performance agents like creatine. Creatine is rarely found in energy drinks, but it greatly enhances cellular hydration and muscle power. We also have citrulline, which is great for improved oxygen delivery to muscles, better blood flow, increased endurance, and reduced muscle soreness. Taurine is for reduced oxidative stress, better fat burning, and more efficient muscle contraction. Essential amino acids. They delay fatigue, improve protein synthesis, and speed muscle recovery. You can order directly on bradnutrition.com using the code BRAD20 for a 20% discount, or also find it on Amazon along with all the other B-Rad nutrition products and get your free shipping with Amazon Prime. Try Super Drink today. You're going to love it. This is the burning muscle sensation where you're getting acid byproducts thrown into the bloodstream through the production of lactate in the cell to fuel very high intensity efforts lasting up to around 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, if you want to go all the way to the circle of the track, you are then transitioning into what's called anaerobic glycolysis. That is the burning of sugar in the body without the use of oxygen. The term anaerobic means without oxygen. So the energy demand is so high, you are moving so quickly, putting out so much energy that you don't have time, you don't have enough oxygen to breathe in order to transition into burning energy with oxygen, which will be called aerobic, right? So the anaerobic glycolysis will take you for around up to 2 minutes. And then anything over 2 minutes is going to be strongly weighted to the aerobic system, aerobic sugar burning, or aerobic fat burning. So, aerobic glycolysis or aerobic fatty acid metabolism. And we talk about that a lot in terms of endurance exercise because we want to be in the fat burning zone, not so much the sugar burning zone. But that is all heavily weighted to the aerobic system. Anything lasting longer than a couple minutes is, by definition, an endurance event. That's why anaerobic fitness is widely disregarded because most things we do, even in a high intensity interval training class, they're asking you to go for 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes of repeat bursts of high intensity effort. Might last 10 seconds, might last 30 seconds. We might be going for a minute on, minute off, all the different training modalities and organized workouts that put you through these protocols. But because they last so long, with insufficient rest to go and replenish those explosive anaerobic energy systems, they're turned off. ATP in the muscle cell, a 7-second burst of maximum effort, requires anywhere from 3 to 7 minutes to fully replenish the muscle cell so that you can again produce a true maximum all-out effort lasting only up to 7 seconds. And of course, the acid accumulation in the bloodstream over the course of a workout. I had my show with Dr. Craig Marker, and I've referenced it often. He talks about how you're disassembling and deaminating cellular proteins in order to fuel all-out efforts that last for longer than 30 seconds, which are not truly all out. I just explained the exercise physiology. But if you're in a high intensity interval training class and you're supposed to go a minute on and a minute off or whatever the protocol is, you are no longer recruiting the maximum explosive energy systems. You're relying more and more and more on the aerobic system. So the 400 meters being only one lap around the track, in most cases, for most generally fit people, is about 66% contribution of the anaerobic system and 33% contribution of the aerobic system. I'll provide a few more details there, but if you can remember, the 400 meters is 2/3 anaerobic. So those high production, easily exhaustible systems that we sequentially go through when we're trying to get around the track. That's why there's so much pain and suffering and muscles burning, and 33% underpinning of aerobic glycolysis, aerobic sugar burning, and probably 0% fat burning if you're only running one lap. And that's great because all the other stuff that we do, the all-day hikes, or even the runs of a mile or 5K or 10K or a half marathon are heavily weighted toward aerobic fat burning. So it's widely disregarded because we generally don't do really short duration efforts with really long rest periods, which is the fundamental of a properly conducted anaerobic workout. Instead, we favor these protocols that are prolonged and developing aerobic endurance mostly. But that important tidbit I shared earlier, anaerobic fitness, anaerobic muscle fibers, and energy producing enzymes in the body fade much more quickly and severely with aging than aerobic fitness. So it would be a very, very sound suggestion to emphasize anaerobic conditioning, especially for anti-aging and especially for fat reduction goals, which a lot of people have in tandem with the desire for longevity. As we described in detail in the Born to Walk book, endurance training doesn't really contribute to fat reduction and can often promote fat storage. Why is that? That's the genetic signaling for the type of training that you're doing. If you're training for something that lasts for hours and hours, or I should say minutes and minutes, if you're training for a race that lasts for 1 hour, you are largely depending on fat as your fuel source. So the genetic signaling, the body does not want to shed fat because fat is going to be the fuel that carries you to the finish line. Instead, the genetic signaling occurs for fat storage and overeating because of the exhausting, depleting nature of endurance training, especially when you're doing it in that chronic cardio pattern of slightly to significantly too elevated of a heart rate. Sprinting, on the other hand, sends essentially the opposite genetic signaling. That's for fat reduction and for gaining or maintaining lean muscle mass. Really quickly, why is that? Because the penalty for carrying excess body fat while doing something brief and explosive is so severe. If you watch the Olympics or the national championships of college, you do not see any fat sprinters. They don't exist. The penalty of carrying non-functional weight when you're going 27 miles an hour in the 100 meters is so severe that the fat leaves the body when you are training to be an anaerobic athlete. In contrast, what do we see in the marathon population? 30% of marathon finishers are outside healthy body composition. 30% of marathon runners are fat. They're still excelling and doing something tremendous and something representative of wonderful endurance, but it's not affecting their body composition in the way that they'd hope or expect to. Sprinting sends the genetic signals for fat reduction. Endurance training sends the genetic signals for fat storage. I mentioned the mile a little bit earlier, and I talked about the Cooper Institute, the famed promoter of aerobics. And there was a big study that they published with 66,000 people, Cooper Institute and the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School. And what they revealed was that one's time in the mile run at age 50 was strongly predictive of their potential to live to age 80 in good health, and more predictive than the things that we've relied on forever, like blood tests and annual physical and checking your blood pressure and all those things. The strong correlation was found with those in the superior category that they were going to sail along to 80 plus in good health if they could throw down a good mile time at age 50, and those in the deficient category had an exponential increase in their morbidity risk if they couldn't deliver an adequate time in the mile at age 50. It was a sign of being unfit and inactive. You remember those numbers? I've talked about them so many times. If you are 50 years old and you can break 8 minutes in the mile run as a man or break 9 minutes as a female, you are in the superior category. You're going to sail to age 80, provided you don't get hit by a bus or have other bad habits or misfortune. You can count on that because you've demonstrated an excellent level of cardiovascular conditioning. If you can't break 12, as a man or can't break 13 as a female for 1 mile run. And we're talking about this is a performance test in front of people in lab coats conducting a very serious study with the stopwatch. So it's as fast as you can go for 1 mile, ready, go, here goes the stopwatch. It's not your pace at your most recent 5K or any of that thing. This is a mile race as fast as you can. Dropping under 8 minutes for man, dropping under 9 for woman is the absolute highest standard. Of course, faster and faster you go, you're not in that risk factor category, so that's great. And this is all fantastic research, and I really love that importance or that attention on the mile run and drifting away from the stuff that we've used that maybe isn't as powerful or indicative. Same with the emphasis now on sarcopenia and dynapenia being the driving factors and most obvious causes of accelerated aging. That said, I'm going to put the mile run up there as a fantastic fitness marker, and I want you to do it and repeat it throughout life. But this, just because it's four laps instead of one, has now become predominantly a test of aerobic fitness, not anaerobic power or explosiveness or rapid force production. Remember, Dr. Ken Cooper, the founder of the Cooper Institute, is considered the founding father of aerobic exercise for heart health. So, of course, they're going to emphasize something that measures aerobic conditioning for heart health and longevity. His 1968 book called Aerobics helped kickstart the running boom. And even amongst the elite athletes that you see going very, very fast in the mile, Hikam El Garouge, I did a whole show on him, the greatest middle distance runner of all time, continues to hold the world record in the mile at the amazing time of 3 minutes and 43 seconds. That is moving, people. What is that, like more than 15 miles an hour? It's 16 or 17 miles an hour for a mile. Imagine catching up to a car in your neighborhood and going 17 on their speedometer for a mile. That's LG. Please watch my YouTube video celebrating his career. But even amongst the elites, the mile is still predominantly fueled by the aerobic system. it's around 80% aerobic and only 20% anaerobic. If you're slower than El Garouge at 343 and it takes you 8 minutes to run the mile or 12 or 14 minutes to run the mile, it's even more aerobic by nature because you're not generating force production and being powerful or explosive in a 14-minute mile. So the mile is heavily weighted toward aerobic and your aerobic conditioning. I think it's a great marker. I think it's vastly superior to checking your 5K time or your 10K time or, God forbid, your marathon time, which is actually correlated with accelerated aging in so many ways. Again, mentioned in detail in the book Born to Walk. So go grab it, especially if you're a running enthusiast, and learn how to do it correctly. But the longer distance stuff is extreme endurance. A 5K is an extreme endurance event in the perspective of exercise physiology, and a mile is 80-20 aerobic conditioning. Then it becomes easy to understand how things like group exercise class lasting an hour, spin class, step class, boot camp, a CrossFit class lasting an hour, a High Rocks challenge lasting an hour to 2 hours or more, or the other protocols that you hear about that they take you in there and you do a variety of exercises, but the duration of the class is what makes it an extreme endurance event by definition from exercise physiology. That is why I want you to broaden your perspective and start to introduce workouts that demand brief explosive efforts with extended rest periods after. I talk about my sprinting template so frequently. The ideal sprint workout for basic enthusiasts would be 4 to 8 reps of a sprint lasting 10 to 20 seconds with a 6-to-1 recovery to work ratio. So even if you're on your stationary bike, let's say you're not running on the field or the track yet, but if you're sprinting as fast as you can for 10 seconds on the stationary bike, you're going to rest for a minute. It seems like an extremely long time to rest when you've only sprinted for 10 seconds. A 10-second sprint on a stationary bike or on whatever modality, the rowing machine or going up a couple staircases, whatever it is, it's not hard for anyone. That's why it's so easy to integrate sprint type efforts into your exercise program, even if you're at a low fitness level. I'm only asking you to hit it hard for 10 seconds, and then you get a minute rest period. If you're going to sprint for 20 seconds, that's a 2-minute rest period minimum. As Lion Martinez explained on our show, real sprinters rest for much longer than that because they want to restore and regenerate that explosive ATP energy source in the muscle cell, which takes several minutes. In fact, the standard that Lion expressed to me when I first met him, he was commenting on one of my Instagram posts, and I said, 6-to-1 recovery to work ratio. And he said, oh, that's not enough. Real sprinters rest 1 minute for every 10 meters that they sprint. So one of my favorite workouts, 60-meter sprints with recovery, 3 times 3 times 60 meters, so 9 times 60 meters. The suggested rest period between each of those 60-meter sprints, which only takes, 7 seconds or 8 seconds or something. Yeah, sorry, 8 seconds, 8 or 9 seconds. Would be 6 minutes. I don't actually rest that long because I don't feel like I'm at the highest caliber of sprinting like Lion Martinez, where he's so explosive that he really absorbs and benefits from a 6-minute sprint, from a 6-minute rest period. But I definitely enjoy resting for 2 or 3 minutes and then stepping up to the starting line, feeling like I'm completely rejuvenated and ready to explode again with maximum output. So this is a real the requirement is a change in mindset from that struggle and suffer mentality that we bring to endurance exercise and that we bring to high intensity interval training, where you're doing 10 times 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. All right, let's go. Let me crank up the music. That is a completely different category of workout from sprinting. Okay. Hopefully you understand the difference when I convey that template of doing 4 to 8 reps of 10 to 20 second sprints, near all out, whatever apparatus you're using, whatever type of exercise, and then resting 6-to-1 recovery to work ratio. Again, I know that in High Rocks and CrossFit and in some of those tough classes where you're doing boot camp, you are performing exercises that require anaerobic force production, right? You're jumping out of the saddle and hitting it hard for 5 seconds, or you're getting off the bike and climbing up a rope and climbing back down, or jumping up onto a box, which is completely explosive and takes less than 1 second, right? Those are all aspects of a, a class like CrossFit. So you have anaerobic efforts, but because the workout is so prolonged, you are starting to get, over time, less and less powerful, less and less explosive, and less anaerobic as the effort proceeds without really long rest breaks to go and return to anaerobic emphasis. That's why the title of the show is not why 8 times 400 meters workout, which is one of the workouts we used to do as triathletes and in high school running, why that's the best longevity marker. I'm not asking you to do 8. I'm asking you to time yourself for 1 and put that in a whole different category than however badass you might be with your half marathon finisher medal or your badge that you attended this many CrossFit workouts this month. This is the fitness exhibited by today's hybrid athlete. Very, very impressive. The people who are winning high rocks or finishing high rocks are extremely impressive. To ask for that much muscular work and power and the endurance to complete all the challenges, and also do that 8K jog in between each challenge in the case of high rocks, and all the crazy stuff that is asked of the CrossFit athlete. I am absolutely amazed. It's incredible, and it's a aspect of fitness that is different and distinct from one's true anaerobic power, explosiveness, and force production. So if you're in the older age groups, because I think a lot of this hybrid athlete stuff is for younger folks, even though my friend and former podcast guest Dave Coburn finished a high rocks at age 64. He was like reporting back, yeah, my time was this, and I hope to beat my time next time. I'm like, who cares what your time was? You finished this thing. It's insane what they make you do. And I can't believe anyone over 60 can finish it. So finishing high rocks, amazing, amazing performance. But we need to take another piece of the pie, that is that anaerobic explosiveness at very short duration efforts. And the quarter is as good as you can get. So hybrid athletes, good on you. As we get older, maybe a little more distinction where we're not pushing ourselves with extreme endurance and the challenge of explosiveness and anaerobic muscle fibers. All right. Now I want to explain why anaerobic performance is so important for everyone, especially seniors and people who don't really care about going fast or being an athlete or being competitive. They just want to enjoy their bird watching club with their binoculars and go to the gym and do a few sets and not push their muscles too hard. There's a lot of reasons why anaerobic performance is widely disregarded, especially novices and seniors categories. And I think the main one, like I mentioned briefly earlier, is this perceived degree of difficulty that you're really going to suffer, and it's going to be too difficult for you, and you don't want to torture your body. And I think that comes from the confusion between a brutal high-intensity interval training class that lasts for an hour and the excellent fitness recommendation to perform brief bouts of explosive exercise lasting only 10 to 20 seconds. It's not that painful. You're not suffering and torturing yourself. It's just a different type of training that indeed will make you feel that burn and breathing hard and having your hands on your knees when you're done with one effort, but they don't last for that long. So you don't have to be terribly intimidated like you might feel intimidated joining the spinning class at 10 o'clock where the peppy instructor really pushes you with hard intervals and it lasts for an hour and your tongue's hanging out at the end. That's high intensity interval training. Of course, that has to be age appropriate and fitness appropriate, but with sprinting and explosiveness, anyone can jump into this world right away. So we need to reject these flawed assumptions, realize that we can quickly learn to perform safe, low-tech types of anaerobic exercise. So you do these brief explosive efforts, and because you do so few of them, and because the rest period is so long, the workout itself is in no way exhausting or depleting like you might be familiar with when it comes to chronic cardio endurance training or the over caffeinated, overly enthusiastic, high intensity interval training workouts that are quite a bit above your current fitness level. That's called torture, suffering, exhaustion, depletion, and Ben and Jerry's pint inhaled in the evening. Not so with sprinting. So when you understand these insights and realize what a true sprinting explosive training session looks like, it's going to feel more doable and more exciting to try to throw this stuff in there. It's not about doing one more rep or sucking it up and finishing a workout when you feel crappy. You always want to feel really great and rested and energized before you do anything powerful, high force production anaerobic. The anaerobic system responds to, if you're taking notes, get this, it responds to high intensity, short duration, and low frequency of workouts. This is the opposite of what the aerobic system responds to, which is low intensity, right? You build your aerobic endurance at low intensity, not at medium to difficult intensity. A lot of people screw that up too. Aerobic system responds to low intensity, long duration, and high frequency of workouts. Think about the runners and putting in their weekly mileage. And the elite marathoners are running 120 miles a week. They're doing 2 workouts a day. They're out there for hours and hours, like the triathletes, the ultra marathoners. They're building the aerobic system with low intensity, long duration, high frequency of workouts. The sprinters, high intensity, short duration of that high intensity effort, and low frequency of workouts. Okay, well, that sounds easy, doesn't it? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to drift away from the overly stressful HIIT programming, high intensity interval training, into what Dr. Craig Marker beautifully coined high intensity repeat training. That's where the long rest period comes in. I talked about the template, 4 to 8. That's all you need to do. When you get fitter and fitter, are you going to do 12 sprints? I'm going to cut off some of these questions or preempt some of the questions that come after the show. No, you don't ever do that. You just get faster, more powerful, and more explosive on the 4 to 8 that you're doing that lasts between 10 and 20 seconds. Can I up it to 30 seconds because I'm getting fitter and fitter? No. A true sprint, remember, a true sprint from exercise physiology is only up to 7 seconds. The reason 10 to 20 seconds is recommended is because it's challenging a little bit of that lactate pathway and that anaerobic glycolysis pathway, cutting it off at 20 seconds before it becomes too destructive, the disassembling and deamination of cellular proteins, as Dr. Craig Marker describes in detail, if you ask the body to deliver a maximum all-out effort lasting longer than 30 seconds. What about the quarter? Yes, the quarter is a performance test that you don't need to perform very often because it is extremely challenging and strenuous and requires extensive recovery time afterward. You are exhausting sequentially those energy systems and seeing what you're all about. It's the race of truth. And then after the race of truth, you get to rest truthfully for a long time before you go and repeat something like that. So I talked about how running sprints on flat ground is going to give you some improved benefits for bone density, the recruiting of bone density, as well as for fat reduction because of the genetic signaling. But for most people, your foray into sprinting is probably going to best begin on a stationary bike, rowing machine, any cardio machine, or running uphill or upstairs where you dramatically minimize the impact load and the impact forces on your joints, connective tissue, and muscles. So sprinting up stadium stairs, sprinting up building stairs, or finding a steep hill and just doing a short duration sprint. Remember, 10 to 20 seconds going up a hill. You're not going very far. You're not pounding your legs, but boy, are you working to maximum. You can also do technically a sprint with something like a kettlebell swing. So an activity where you're delivering a near maximum effort that lasts for short duration. So it might be a 10-second kettlebell swing and then putting the kettlebell down for a minute and doing another 10-second burst of explosive kettlebell swinging if you aren't ready to go and do the running or the other things recommended. Okay, here's the big kicker, especially for seniors. I want you to pay attention because preserving your anaerobic function muscle power, and explosiveness is what's going to keep you safe from what the Centers for Disease Control calls the number one cause of demise and death in seniors over age 65, and that is falling and adverse related health consequences. Raise your hand if you know a senior or you are a senior and have had a fall or know someone who's fallen and had a misfortune in recent times. I can think of all kinds of people in my world that have had serious falls causing problems. And the older you get, the more severe and the higher risk it is. It's part of life for everyone who gets old. And it doesn't necessarily have to be if you can preserve your anaerobic power. Think about this. A fall starts with a misstep, right? You take a misstep, you trip over the carpet edge or a bump on a trail, and you're headed down. You're headed for a potential fall. The attempt to regain your balance could essentially be described as a 1 rep max to support your unstable body weight. 1 rep max meaning it's a weightlifting term. What's your 1 rep max for deadlifting or for bench pressing? How much weight can you lift with one effort? So your body weight is now unstable. And when you trip on a rocky trail, let's say a young, fit, athletic person hits that root and stumbles forward into an aggressive deep lunge step, followed by an awkward side step or two or three, and then amazingly regains their balance, their center of gravity, and resumes walking down the trail. Whoa, that was a close one. That same misstep for an elderly person with diminished mobility and diminished functional muscle power, even a tiny misstep, even dragging that foot on the edge of the carpet and throwing off that expected next step results in a face plant because there's no way there's going to be an aggressive mini lunge step. You know what I'm talking about when I say mini lunge step? Like, lurching forward down into the lunge position where your thigh gets parallel to the ground. Even a careful guided lunge step is out of the realm of many senior citizens who aren't strong enough to lower down into a lunge position. So, of course, they're not going to catch their balance when they bump on a trail. Big, huge difference due to the difference in explosive muscle power and the ability to manage a single rep of unstable body weight. I talked about my brother Wally before. I've mentioned this before on a show, but he had an amazing display of his anaerobic muscle power and preservation of fitness when we were moving my mom out of her house and carrying a bunch of heavy furniture into the truck. And I think it was 3 of us were carrying a giant, heavy motorized couch. And he was backing up down a slope driveway and stepped onto a pile of blankets that he didn't realize was there. So he took the step onto the pile of blankets, let go of the couch, spun backwards and did like a 360 pirouette, a couple mini lunge steps, and finally caught his balance before he fell. At the age of 72, that could have been a huge fork in the road turning point in his life because many people who fall on an extreme fall like that will break a hip, they're bedridden, they fall out of whatever exercise program they were adhering to before their accident, and they have a long, painful recovery, and they never regain that lost function. And then we're looking at the statistics, the disturbing statistics that just came out, that the average male life expectancy in the United States has dropped to 76. That's the first time in history that we have declined life expectancy. So the younger generation has a shorter life expectancy than their parents. Instead, my brother caught his balance, and thankfully that body was able to perform under the heavy pressure of tripping and staggering around. If that's not enough motivation to have you throw in some anaerobic exercise into your fitness regimen, I don't know what is. Falling sounds like a miserable way to go and, take a dive off whatever quality of life you had before the fall. My wife right now is recovering from slipping in on the ice and breaking her kneecap and having surgery to wire the kneecap together. And believe me, it disrupts every little thing you can do in life when you don't have that mobility and that functionality. Fortunately, she'll be making a full recovery and devoted physical therapy rehab. Maybe she'll even be better than when she started. That was what my enthusiasm was at the start. Like, hey, here's now a driving cause to say, all right, well, first I got to rehab from this surgery and then take that assignment and run with it. Oh yeah, make a misfortune into something good. Anyway, instead of having to break your knee and have surgery, why don't you start now with explosive anaerobic muscle training? This is simple, not time consuming. You can do it in so many different ways. And let's talk about, as we wrap up here, let's talk about the unique physiology of the 400 and why it's such an awesome way to measure your anaerobic performance. As I alluded to earlier, basically, in the most simple exercise physiology terms, the 400 is a sprint that lasts too long for a human to truly sprint. That's why I criticize the high intensity interval training workouts. They're asking you to sprint when you can't really sprint for all that time, and then you don't have enough rest period, and then the workout becomes exhausting, depleting, and stimulating of the aerobic system rather than the anaerobic system. But for a single lap around the track, oh my gosh, how beautiful it is to watch the greatest runners circle that track at tremendous speed. The male world record is 43 seconds. Sidney McLaughlin, the great American track and field champion, ran 47 to win the Olympics, win the World Championships last year. That's the greatest time in female history by my count. And we would all be better served to try our hand at this wonderful event, honoring the great example of the elites. It might take 90 seconds, might take 2 minutes, might take longer than that, wherever your fitness level is right now, but it's a short duration effort that recruits the different energy systems that are so critical to longevity. Why didn't I pick the 100 or the 200? As I mentioned, 100 is really almost pure explosiveness. It lasts for longer than 7 seconds, so even the elite athletes are decelerating at the end of the 100 meters when they're running 9 seconds because the body's only capable of true maximum for 7. But it's so heavily weighted toward explosiveness that you can actually be in that spare tire category, like I talked about with the adult league basketball players. You can have a spare tire and still go pretty fast in the 100. You can have extreme deficiencies in aerobic conditioning where you might barely able to run a mile in 12 minutes or 10 minutes and still be pretty quick just from your genetics and perhaps your sprinting background. So the 400 race of truth, 100, which I love and love to compete in. I'm not very good because of my genetics, but it certainly is a wonderful athletic challenge. But that's pure explosiveness, and the 400 is something entirely different. Indeed, like I said before, it's 2/3 anaerobic, 1/3 aerobic. But to be more specific, the contribution is around 10 to 15% of that ATP creatine phosphate system, 50 to 60% anaerobic glycolysis, and then 30 to 40% aerobic metabolism. And of course, I'm going to count the ATP creatine phosphate system in that anaerobic category when I said it's 2/3 anaerobic, 1/3 aerobic. But this is more specific because that creatine phosphate system that fuels the first 7 seconds is different and distinct even from anaerobic and aerobic systems. That's why little known tidbit about elite 400-meter runners, they go pretty much all out for the first 7 seconds of the race, and they call it like free speed because you're not going to use the creatine phosphate system anymore after it's been exhausted after that first 7 seconds, but you go out at full speed and build up the momentum of running at that high speed, and then they call it floating down the back stretch. So you start on the curve, you're going very fast around the curve, you're floating down the back stretch, you're trying to hold your form around the second curve, and then the home straight is just about suffering, dealing with that lactic acid burn and trying to get to the finish line without breaking form. Okay, so that is the real breakdown of the energy systems, and that means, thank you to ChatGPT for the good description here, a 400-meter runner has a balanced metabolic engine of high glycolytic capacity, strong acid buffering capacity, and a meaningful anaerobic contribution. In contrast, this is interesting, a lesser trained runner trying to do 400 meters relies heavily on uncontrolled anaerobic glycolysis, leading to a rapid metabolic crash. Yes, amazingly so. I was amazed to learn that the untrained runner relies less on that underpinning of the aerobic system than the elite runner, and that's because an untrained runner has a crappy aerobic system. So, what they're going to do when they're asked to run a lap around the trap is they're going to build up that lactic acid production really quickly, and they're going to suffer tremendously, just like the elite runner suffers tremendously, but they're going to be going slower. And I even believe that when I finish a 400 meter, because I'm not at Olympic caliber fitness, I feel more exhausted than what I see on TV of the elites crossing the finish line, raising their arms over their head, which I can't do when I'm finishing 400 meters. I require 1 to 2 minute recovery with my hands on my knees before I can raise them or yell and scream or start my victory lap. So, that tremendous level of not only the ability to buffer acid, the ability to burn sugar really quickly in the muscle cell, burn ATP really quickly in the muscle cell, but also that strong aerobic contribution is why the elite athlete can cross the line and then start jogging into their victory lap, while masters like me have their hands on their knees and are wheezing and trying to catch their breath. Okay. That said, if you really feel intimidated and you're starting from a low fitness capability, maybe you could start timing yourself at 200 meters until you build some fitness competency and watch that time drop, especially if you can't finish a 400 meters in under 2 minutes. This is meant to be that high performance, power, explosive, high force production, finishing in a short time, recruiting all the energy systems. So that's my little caveat that can put you at the 200 instead of the quarter as your longevity marker for now. So, what are some good standards to pursue here? We talked about the mile, right? The great research from 66,000 subjects that busting 8 minutes at age 50 is superior category, busting 9 for the female, and sure as heck better break 12 or 13. So for the 400, since no such broad, scientifically validated standard exists, let's create our own here. If you're around age 50, and you realize the 8 minutes gold standard for males for the mile, you sure as heck better be able to break 2 minutes for 400. That's an 8 minute pace, right? A quarter mile, 2, 4, 6, 8 approximately. Uh, let's say a minute 45, which is quite a bit better than 2 minutes. But again, you're only going one lap instead of four. Let's say 145 is that baseline passing competency standard. And then if we go down to a minute 30, 90 seconds for one lap, I'm going to say that's very good. And anything below that is superior, is outstanding. I've talked to a lot of people who think they can run much faster than they might actually discover when they head to the track. I'm remembering my wonderful sprinting mentor, world champion 400-meter runner, and former podcast guest Cynthia Monteleone, coach to many Olympic athletes for metabolic function and sprint training. And she talked about how her daughter found out that mom was a 400-meter runner in college and said, "Mom, I want to do that too. Can we go to the track and run 400 meters?" And Cynthia said, "Sure." And they both finished around in a minute and a half. And this is a mom. Cynthia was a mom, 20 years removed from her college career, but still an exceptional athlete that had a tremendous athletic background. And she went to the track and she called it embarrassing that she could only run a minute 30 with zero training and basically deeply immersed into raising a family. And the kid, her daughter at whatever age, who's now a collegiate runner, but I think she was just a child at that time. So 90 seconds, pretty darn good for a little kid too. So I'm going to say that's very good for a male at age 50. And again, if you're listening and you're my son in his 20s, who was a fantastic high school 400-meter runner, but hasn't run it in, let's see, around a decade. We talk about this all the time. I'm like, "You think you can still bust a minute in the 400? And Jack's like, "Oh, sure I could, easily." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not so sure now that you weigh 215 pounds of solid muscle instead of 150 when you were running track as a skinny 10th grader. But it would be very interesting to see what a super fit 20-ish male could go and run the 400 in. But I'm going to ask them to run a lot faster than the 50-year-old to get that passing grade. So a 50-year-old male, we're going to do females shortly, minute 30, I'd say is very good for 400-meter time. And 25-year-old male, we don't need to get you down closer toward a minute 15, a minute 10 to say very good. And then superior would be, let's say, under a minute. Of course, that would be superior. And I expect nothing less from my son because he was running 51 in high school. Even with that a decade off, I'm sure he could break a minute. Just hope he doesn't listen to the show because I'm going to keep teasing him that he can't until it actually happens. Females. Okay, so if you can break 9 at age 50, which my sister almost did, coming out of nowhere with no training. She ran like a 9:15 on her 50th birthday. She wanted to honor the Cooper Institute, Texas A&M research, and I thought that was a fantastic performance for someone who didn't do any endurance running. And okay, so if 9's excellent, that's 2-minute 15 pace for 400. So let's say take 15 seconds off that, like we did for the male, and we're going to call 2 minutes for 400 meters baseline competency passing rate. I'm going to say very good is a minute 45, and anything below that is superior. So Cynthia, even though she denigrated her performance, running a minute 30, I believe she was around 40 years old or early 40s because she won the world title when she was 45, running a 56. So she improved from a minute 30 to 56 in a few years of devoted training. But starting point, pretty awesome for the average person. And for 50-year-old females, let's see if we can get under a minute 45. Again, 25-year-old athletic fit female, I'd like to see you go much faster than that to get that very good award. Hey, I hope I've convinced you to go and try the 400. I feel like it's a quintessential human exercise to be able to move quickly through space. It's just, in order to live life to the fullest, you should be able to move your body quickly for one lap around the track for a short distance. And of course, be able to hike for hours and be able to lift heavy weights in the gym. But of all that clickbait, I can't think of anything more compelling than just heading to the track, getting that stopwatch like Cynthia did and like a lot of people who are going to do after this show, and getting yourself on the board with a 400-meter time. Granted, there are many other valid tests of fitness that have a good correlation with longevity. I talked about this in a little more detail in the book Born to Walk, but things like grip strength, your competency with squats, how many squats you can do, how many push-ups you can do. There's great research from the Honolulu Heart Study that showed people that had good squat competency at a younger age had much more predictability to live to old age in good health. Same with, of course, the mile time and all that. But I'm sure someday we'll have a fantastic test about 400-meter times and put all those standards up. But for now, age 50, 130 for males, very good. 145 for females, very good. And then take that 6% factor per decade and subtract or add to that time. So if you're 100, we can add quite a bit of time to where if you can make it around the track in whatever 3 minutes or something, even walking if you're 100 is fantastic. But whatever age you are, let's age adjust to do this correctly. And I'd love to hear from you what you think, especially if you go out and try a 400. We could amass a little database ourselves here. Thank you for listening to this hopefully life-changing show with the big takeaway of get out there and do something powerful, explosive, brief in duration. You don't have to do it very often. Once a week for a sprint-type workout is fine. Maybe more frequently if you're doing low or no impact. You can certainly sprint for 10 seconds on the bike a handful of times, a couple times a week, and it could change your life, change your physique, and help you age gracefully, avoiding those risks of falling that are all around us every day. Thank you so much. Send an email to podcast@bradventures.com, and I will read everything. I can't wait to hear from you. I hope you enjoyed this video and will hit like and subscribe below. You can visit bradkearns.com for show notes, timestamps, and helpful links. Comment on the video. We read them all. You can also email us, podcast@bradventures.com. I love to connect. And the best way to support this channel is to check out the finest quality performance nutrition supplements in the world at bradnutrition.com. or at the BRAD store on Amazon.